Yeah, yeah. And there's something else there about time as well, I think,
Absolutely.
coming up,
Yeah.
and obviously if the bill is enacted, it will be limited to a kind of a 6 month prognosis, which doesn't kind of provide a lot of time for professionals to maybe do an assessment,
Hmm.
and for a person to get their affairs in order. To me, it sounds like it's not a lot of time anyway. Um, but I kind of, yeah, if I can just kind of maybe go back a little bit, you kind of mentioned the service that you work in, which is the prisons, a couple of times. If assisted dying were legalised in Ireland, what impact, if any, would that have on the service that you work in? So you spoke a while ago about people who might feel suicidal following a kind of a crime or an act of murder or something like that. But could it affect the service that you work in different ways if it were legalised? So I would imagine there are terminally ill people in prison, um,
Yeah.
and how might that impact?
Yeah, I think the reality is that we have very few, because typically I think when somebody is so ill, generally speaking, they would be kind of have received temporary release
Okay.
to hospice or whatever. But we do have cases where the courts don't go for that, and we've had one case which where the prison service, or certainly representatives of the prison service, argued that equivalence of care could be provided within the prisons, um, which I thought was abhorrent myself. But anyway, and so, we do on occasion have people who die in custody, but it tends to be rare. But I think it would open up for all of us. We would need, one thing we're quite strong on, I think, in our services, developing policies and procedures. We're fairly robust on that. So I think it's something we'd have to develop policies and procedures around, to support staff, of all sorts of views in terms of what kind of views they may have or beliefs they may have, and then also to put obviously processes in place around how we could contribute to and support somebody being an autonomous individual, and acting in their own life.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. So there's two things there that I might just kind of hold on for a moment. One is
Hmm.
supporting the person who makes the request to have their debt hastened, and you were kind of talking about that within the context of your own service, and the other one was supporting other staff members who might be involved in kind of the service as well if it were legalised. So I'm just going to focus on those two for a sec. Um, so if it were legalised in Ireland, how could psychology help a person who makes a request to hasten their debt? So you kind of spoke about the prison services, but I want you to kind of talk about it more broadly,
Hmm.
if you can.
Yeah. Well, I think even through things like you're doing, that I think research in the area and the way we can kind of, I know it's old fashioned to say it now, we talk about mixed methods. I suppose I was about to say triangulate their methodologies, but um, in research fields that are embryonic or where there might be kind of more kind of value laden and kind of emotive conversation to national debate. I think if something like this was going to go to a citizens' assembly, which our previous government have been fond of utilising, that having evidence there to speak to it, and in an embryonic research field in this country to talk about, looking at the kind of lived experience of people who've families, people, friends, people who've gone through it, people who maybe had made a decision and changed their minds, looking at that side of things as well, I suppose. Um, and also maybe research with people, I don't know what exists, but whatever kind of research field is there, being able to communicate that around, the process that people go through, up to the point of taking the action, and ending their life, and looking at the sequelae for those left behind, so, and being able to kind of contribute to the debate in an unemotive way there. I think supporting people, within psychology services, you could have It could be very divisive. You may have people with strong views either way. So I think it's really important that we kind of model and promote a culture of inclusion, that diversity of values is to be welcomed. We're not expecting or anticipating everyone will think and feel the same. And really promoting that culture across a multi-D team and within organisations. But I would imagine that I suppose just talking to people myself kind of around the topic over the years, not at any great length, but a lot of the conversation seems to be around the act and some of it around looking at the process of making the decision. Whereas I suppose I'd be interested in also about how somebody's capacity gets reviewed, how decisions can be reviewed or overturned, and also about the sequelae, about managing when people are left behind. And certainly in a service like ours, where, as I mentioned, there's some people who I know for 15, 16 years. If some of those people, chose to end their life, how helping professionals or medical professionals or allied health professionals kind of meaning make themselves around clients making these decisions.
Yeah. So a kind of a holistic kind of a supportive role would be kind of where you would see psychology placed in terms of exploring the request with the person. Is that what you're saying? And also the assessment piece, obviously, but also then maybe working with family members who might be left behind after the person's death has been hastened. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and also I think even, healthcare professionals, even, special needs assistants, nurses, people working at a day-to-day level. I can imagine that for people working in services where there is a lot of death, there may be particular continuing professional development or personal support, that may help there. And who knows,
Sorry, I was just going to ask, would that be so kind of therapeutic support, or would it be more kind of supervision-based support that psychology could provide to other professionals?
Well, I think it could be both, and I think there's something about even just kind of, I think a lot of it is about just providing. I know sometimes we have deaths in custody, and I work with kind of, say, the travelling community a lot, and I see the value when something like that happens of providing the space for the people to, just to sit and process. You often don't have to do an awful lot in it other than maintain that safe space to just discharge emotion, talk about what's happened. And so I think there's a value in that, because I suppose that's one of our kind of unique selling points, almost, that it's sort of our bread and butter, and so if we kind of want to model how we kind of organisationally might emotionally regulate, and I think it would be kind of, again, acknowledging that, there is an evolution in terms of how things develop as a country, that, so there will be a lot we don't know about how this would work in Ireland or how impact, but that we know something of how it's impacted elsewhere and what supports might put in place and how some of that might be trial and error, that psychology won't have all the answers either. But
yeah. And to be fair, like, my kind of perusal of the literature to date would suggest that I suppose psychology has a minimal role in countries where it is legalised. I know in some countries, like for maybe Canada, they're looking at more of an MDT approach, but it is rare. In a lot of countries, it's general practitioners, managing this from their service, and I think it is causing huge difficulties in the countries where that's the model,
Okay.
That would be kind of my own opinion, though. I haven't really come across any research kind of examining or exploring the actual models of care or the frameworks themselves, or comparing and contrasting them. But I do see that the onus kind of, or the responsibility, falls on GPs in a lot of countries. Whereas I think I think if it were to be legalised in Ireland, we're probably the right size